My father's hand clamped on the doorknob, knuckles white, as he leaned forward and said, calm as ice, no apology, no entry. The porch light flickered above us. My suitcase lay on its side in the cold, one sweater hanging out like a white flag. Behind him, my sister Lila folded her arms with that slow, self-satisfied smile she'd perfected in childhood. Her kid, Owen, popped a bubble of gum and grinned. I whispered, Dad, my shift ends in 2 hours. I just need to shower. He didn't blink. Then apologize. The door clicked shut. I stood there on the porch, scrubs still damp with sweat, my badge dangling from my pocket. The November wind cut through my thin jacket. Inside, I heard Lila laugh. That sharp, triumphant sound that meant she'd won again. My phone buzzed. Work. Asking if I could cover morning rounds. I looked at my locked-out suitcase, then at the darkened windows of the house I had lived in for 31 years. Something inside me cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like ice before it shatters completely. My name was Madeline Pierce, 31 years old, patient care coordinator at Redwood Memorial Hospital. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift, still wearing scrubs stained with someone's spilled Jell-O from lunch service. I grew up believing that if I kept my head down, worked hard, and didn't cause trouble, I'd earn a fair place in my family. I paid rent to Dad every month. I bought groceries. I fixed broken cabinets and unclogged toilets while Lila posted photos of Owen at birthday parties I'd helped fund. Turns out, fair never applied to me. It applied to Lila, the favourite daughter who could do no wrong. It applied to Owen, the golden grandchild who received whatever he demanded. It applied to everyone except the daughter who showed up, worked double shifts, and asked for nothing but basic respect. I learned early that being good wasn't enough. Being useful wasn't enough. In my family, you had to be chosen, and I never was. The whole thing started 2 days earlier when I found Owen digging through my work bag in my bedroom. He was ripping open sealed medical envelopes, confidential patient intake forms I'd brought home to file. I didn't yell. I just told him firmly to put them down and leave my room. Lila stormed in like I'd slapped a crown off her head. "You made him cry," she accused, pointing at Owen. I glanced at her son, who wasn't crying at all. He was bored, already reaching for something else to destroy. He was going through confidential hospital documents, I explained calmly. Those can't be tampered with. Dad appeared in the doorway, already taking her side before hearing the full story. "Couldn't you be nicer, Maddie?" he asked, disappointment thick in his voice. Same script. Every single time. It didn't matter what actually happened. It didn't matter that Owen had violated my privacy and potentially my job security. What mattered was that Lila felt upset, and I was always the easiest target. That night was Dad's family dinner, which he basically hosted as a shrine to Lila's motherhood. 12 relatives crowded around the dining table. I was background decoration, useful only for passing dishes and refilling drinks. When Owen deliberately dumped cranberry juice on my white blouse, everyone laughed. Except me. The cold liquid soaked through to my skin. "Oops," Owen said, not even pretending it was an accident. When I asked him to apologize, Lila jumped in immediately. "He's just a kid, stop being so dramatic, Maddie." Dramatic, that word again. The one they used whenever I set any boundary, requested any respect, or dared to suggest that Owen's behaviour had consequences. Aunt Carol tried to hand me napkins, sympathy in her eyes, but she said nothing. Nobody ever said anything when Lila and Dad teamed up against me. I excused myself to the bathroom, scrubbed at the stain until my fingers turned red, and wondered how much longer I could live like this. When I returned, Dad stood up in front of all 12 relatives and announced, "Maddie, you owe Lila and Owen an apology." Everyone stared. Heat climbed up my neck, spreading across my cheeks. The room went silent except for the scrape of someone's fork against a plate. "For what?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "For upsetting them. For making Owen feel bad. For creating tension at a family gathering." Lila smirked from across the table, victory gleaming in her eyes. I looked at Dad, searching for any trace of fairness, any acknowledgement that I was the one wearing juice and humiliation. Nothing. I won't apologize for asking a child to respect my belongings, I said quietly. Dad's face hardened. Then you're choosing to be difficult. That night, lying in bed, I got the text. If you won't apologize, don't come home tomorrow. Pack a bag and leave until you're ready to make things right. I read it 3 times before the reality sank in. I spent the next night in my car in the hospital parking lot. My muscles ached from the cramped position. The seats didn't recline far enough. Every hour, security drove past, shining their flashlight briefly before moving on. My phone buzzed at 5 in the morning, work asking if I could cover an early shift since someone called in sick. Of course I could. I needed the hours, I needed the distraction. I needed to be somewhere I had value. At the hospital, I told no one. I brushed my teeth in the staff bathroom, changed into fresh scrubs from my locker, and pretended everything was fine. I'd perfected that skill over 31 years. During my break, I sat in my car and cried for exactly 10 minutes. Then I dried my face, reapplied my mascara, and went back inside. Nobody noticed. Or maybe they did and just didn't ask. Either way, I was alone, completely, utterly alone. My co-worker Kelsey noticed my stiff walk on the second day. You okay? She asked, genuine concern crinkling her eyes. I lied automatically. Just slept weird. She studied me for a moment, then pressed anyway. Maddie, you look like you slept in a parking lot. The accuracy of her guess broke something in me. I said softly, my voice cracking. I did. She didn't ask invasive questions. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She just handed me a thermos of real coffee, the expensive kind, not the burnt hospital brew, and squeezed my shoulder. Take this. And if you need a place tonight, I've got a couch. Not pity. Kindness. The kind I'd forgotten existed. I almost cried again right there in the hallway, but I held it together. Barely. That thermos of coffee felt heavier than it should have, weighted with the simple truth that a co-worker cared more about my well-being than my own father did. That same afternoon, Lila showed up at the hospital with Owen bouncing beside her. He immediately started running around the coordinator's station, bumping into equipment carts and grabbing at files. Lila marched straight to my desk, speaking loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. You need to apologize so Dad stops worrying. This is ridiculous, Maddie. You're tearing the family apart over nothing. I looked up from my computer, meeting her eyes directly. No. The word came out clear and firm. Her mouth dropped open like I'd spoken in tongues, like I'd violated some fundamental law of nature. What did you just say? She demanded. I said no. I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do wrong. Owen knocked over a small trash bin. The sound echoed through the corridor. Lila flushed red, grabbing Owen's arm roughly. You're being selfish, she hissed before turning to storm away. Kelsey watched the whole thing, then handed me a sticky note with an address. My couch. Tonight. During that chaos, Mr. Alden, the hospital's operations director, walked by and saw Owen nearly topple an equipment cart loaded with IV supplies. His expression shifted from casual to alert. Visitors' children can't run freely in clinical areas, he said firmly to Lila. She snapped back immediately, defensive and sharp. My sister works here, I'm allowed to visit. Mr. Alden's gaze moved to me, assessing. Is everything all right, Miss Pierce? I wanted to say yes automatically to smooth everything over like I always did, but something in his steady professional concern made me pause. Yes, I finally said, though we both knew it was only partially true. He nodded slowly, then addressed Lila again. Please keep your child in the lobby waiting area. Safety protocols apply to everyone. After they left, Mr. Alden stopped by my desk. If you need anything, my door's open. In his eyes, I saw something new. Concern, yes, but also respect. Professional recognition. It felt foreign and precious. That evening, Dad sent a long text about family expectations and disappointing behavior. I read it while sitting on Kelsey's couch, wrapped in a borrowed blanket. But then something odd happened. My Aunt Carol called, her voice hushed like she was hiding in another room. "Sweetheart, your father told everyone at church that you screamed at Owen and cursed at Lila." My stomach tightened into a cold knot. "I didn't. I never raised my voice." "I know," she whispered urgently. "I was there at dinner, remember? I saw what actually happened. And Maddie, there's more. He's been saying things behind your back for years, telling people you're difficult, ungrateful, that you refuse to help with family." A cold clarity washed over me, spreading through my chest like ice water. This wasn't just favoritism. This wasn't just Dad choosing Lila over me in the moment. This was a narrative he'd been building for years, a story where I was always the villain and they were always the victims. He'd poisoned the family against me long before this incident. Instead of exploding, I went still, completely, utterly still. If Dad and Lila built their power on stories about me, lies about who I was and what I'd done, then all I had to do was let the truth expose them. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to defend myself loudly. I just needed to step back and let their house of cards collapse under its own weight. I thanked Aunt Carol and hung up. Then I made a decision. I would stop participating in their narrative entirely. No more explanations. No more defending myself. No more trying to earn their approval. I would simply live my life, do my work, and let my actions speak louder than their lies. Kelsey came home with takeout and found me sitting in the dark, strangely calm. "You okay?" she asked. I smiled for the first time in days. "Yeah, I think I finally am." Because anger burns hot and fast. But clarity runs cold and deep and lasts forever. I began taking every overtime shift offered. The night shifts paid more and I needed every dollar. I saved aggressively, cutting every unnecessary expense. No coffee shop visits, no new clothes. Rice, beans and vegetables became my staples. Kelsey helped me search for apartments on her laptop during lunch breaks. Most places near the hospital were too expensive, but then we found a small studio above a bookstore. Old building, creaky floors, but affordable and mine. The landlord, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, looked at my hospital badge and said, "Healthcare workers are good tenants. You're approved." I signed the lease 3 weeks after Dad kicked me out. It wasn't much. 400 square feet, a kitchenette barely big enough to turn around in, a bathroom with ancient tiles. But it had a lock on the door that only I controlled. For the first time in years, I breathed without bracing for someone's judgment. I bought a cheap air mattress and 2 folded chairs from a thrift store. That first night alone, I slept better than I had in months. A month after moving into my studio, Mr. Alden called me into his office. My heart hammered, assuming I'd made some mistake, violated some protocol. Instead, he gestured to a chair and smiled. "You've been holding this place together, Miss Pierce. The night shift supervisor mentioned you've taken on additional coordination duties without being asked. Patient feedback specifically names you as helpful and compassionate." He slid a formal document across his desk. "You're being considered for senior coordinator. The promotion comes with a significant salary increase and full benefits package. There'll be an interview process, but I'm recommending you strongly." I stared at the paper, the words blurring slightly. A real promotion, not a favor, not charity. Recognition I'd actually earned through competence and dedication. "Thank you," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. "You've earned it," he said simply. I walked out of his office feeling 10 feet tall. For years I'd been told I wasn't enough. Now someone who actually mattered professionally was saying I was exceptional. Then Karma tapped on the door with both fists. 2 weeks later, Dad called my cell at 7 in the morning. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Maddie," he said, skipping any greeting. "Can you watch Owen today? Lila's daycare got shut down for health code violations, and she needs someone reliable." Reliable? That word tasted bitter. "I can't," I said calmly. "I'm working a double shift." He exhaled sharply, frustration crackling through the phone. Can't you call in? This is family, Maddie. You're being selfish. That word again. Selfish. For years it had cut me deep, made me question myself, pushed me to sacrifice more and more. Now it just revealed exactly who he'd always been, someone who confused boundaries with betrayal, who mistook self-preservation for cruelty. No, Dad. I can't help. I hung up before he could argue further. My hands shook slightly, but my heart felt strangely light. I'd said no, and the world hadn't ended. I was still standing, still breathing, still whole. Word spread quickly through the family that I had abandoned them in their time of need. Cousin texts and Facebook messages painted me as cold and heartless. But something unexpected happened. Relatives who'd witnessed the cranberry juice incident, the public apology demand, the years of constant favoritism. They started messaging me privately. Aunt Carol sent a long email explaining she'd watched Dad treat me like a servant for years, while Lila received princess treatment. Uncle Marcus called to say he'd always thought the dynamic was wrong, but hadn't known how to intervene. Even my grandmother, Dad's own mother, sent a brief text. You did the right thing, sweetheart. Sometimes distance is the only answer. The narrative Dad and Lila had carefully constructed began cracking, fissures spreading through their version of reality. Other family members started questioning the stories they'd been told. Why had Dad kicked out his employed, responsible daughter, but continued housing his unemployed one? Why was I punished for boundaries while Lila was excused for tantrums? The truth was surfacing despite their efforts. 6 weeks after my exile began, Dad showed up at my studio apartment unannounced. I'd just gotten home from a shift, still in scrubs. He stood in the narrow hallway outside my door, looking uncomfortable and out of place. I didn't invite him in immediately, just stood in the doorway. He looked around the tiny studio with visible disappointment, his gaze taking in my air mattress, my thrift store furniture, my single window, overlooking the bookstore's back alley. I thought you'd come home by now, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. The assumption in those words, that this was temporary, that I'd eventually cave, made something inside me harden. Home requires respect, Dad. This might be small, but it's mine, and nobody here treats me like I'm worthless. His jaw twitched. Just apologize to Lila and Owen. Make things simple, come back, and we'll forget this whole mess. I looked at him clearly, maybe for the first time ever. No, I'm done apologizing for things I didn't do wrong. I'm done being your scapegoat. Then came the slow unraveling. Without me babysitting constantly, driving Owen to activities, cooking dinners, mediating arguments, defending Lila to relatives, and handling household maintenance, everything started collapsing. Lila cracked under the pressure of actual parenting without a backup. She quit her part-time retail job, claiming the stress was too much. Dad started covering her bills, rent, utilities, groceries, Owen's expenses. The house I'd helped maintain for years began draining his retirement savings. Pipes burst because nobody called the plumber. The lawn became overgrown because I wasn't there to mow it anymore. Small problems became expensive disasters through neglect. Aunt Carol kept me updated through brief phone calls. Your father looks exhausted, she reported. And Lila's demanding more money every week. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles, but I felt no guilt either. These were consequences of their own choices, their own treatment of me. I hadn't caused this. I'd simply stopped preventing the inevitable by sacrificing myself endlessly. 3 months after my exile, Dad organised another family dinner. I wasn't invited, but Aunt Carol called afterward with a full report, barely containing her amazement. Maddie, it was incredible. The relatives weren't on his side this time. Apparently Uncle Marcus started the questioning. Why did you kick out the daughter who actually works and contributes, but keeps supporting the one who quit her job? Cousin Beth added, why does Lila get to yell and make demands, but Maddie gets punished for setting basic boundaries? Grandmother asked pointedly, when exactly did Maddie do something wrong? Because I've been thinking about it and I can't figure it out. Dad stammered through non-answers. Lila flushed beet red and eventually stormed out with Owen. They'd expected support, validation, agreement that I was the problem. Instead, they faced questions they couldn't answer without exposing their own unfairness. Aunt Carol said she'd never seen Dad look so uncomfortable. They'd unravelled themselves without me saying a single word. The truth had simply become impossible to ignore. Chew. A week after that disastrous dinner, Dad called. His voice sounded thin, stretched tight with stress. Maddie, I need to tell you something. I might lose the house. I blinked, processing this information while stirring pasta in my tiny kitchenette. Why are you telling me? Because you lived there. You should know what's happening. The audacity of that statement nearly made me laugh. I'd lived there, yes, paying rent, covering utilities, maintaining everything while he poured money into Lila's endless needs. Okay, I said, simply offering nothing else. Aren't you going to ask what happened? He pressed. Not really. It's not my problem anymore, Dad. The silence on his end stretched long and uncomfortable. Then he said quietly, I didn't think you'd be this cold. Cold. Another word meant to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty for having boundaries. I'm not cold. I'm just not responsible for fixing everything anymore. I hung up feeling strange, not happy about his troubles, but not guilty either. Just neutral. Free. Karma was working overtime, and I wasn't its accomplice or its target anymore. The week before Thanksgiving, Mr. Alden called me into his office again. Miss Peirce, I'm pleased to inform you that the promotion is official. You're now senior coordinator, effective immediately. He handed me a formal letter detailing everything. My new salary was nearly 40% higher than before. My benefits doubled to include dental, vision, and a retirement match. My schedule would shift to mostly daytime hours with better consistency. I'd have my own small office instead of sharing the coordinator station. Professional development funds for additional training or certifications. I read the letter 3 times, making sure it was real. Thank you, I whispered, my eyes burning with the tears I refused to let fall in his office. You earned every bit of this, Mr. Alden said warmly. You're one of the most reliable, compassionate staff members we have. This hospital is lucky to have you. I walked out of his office and immediately called Kelsey. We celebrated that night with cheap wine and expensive cheese, laughing in my tiny studio about how far I'd come from sleeping in my car. 3 days before Christmas, Dad showed up in the hospital lobby. I was crossing through on my way to my new office when I saw him standing awkwardly near the information desk, looking smaller somehow. Deflated. Can we talk? He asked when he spotted me. I checked my watch and nodded, leading him outside to a bench near the employee entrance. He sat heavily, not meeting my eyes. We need help, Maddie. Financially. The mortgage is 3 months behind. Lila's expenses keep increasing. Owen needs things for school. I waited, saying nothing, letting him continue. The church has helped some, but it's not enough, and I shouldn't have kicked you out. There it was, the apology he'd demanded from me, now reversed and offered reluctantly. I was wrong, he continued, the words clearly painful. I should have listened to your side. I should have treated you fairly. I breathed slowly, watching a bird hop across the parking lot. Finally, I spoke. Dad, I didn't leave you. You pushed me out. He swallowed hard, his hands clasped between his knees. I know. I see that now. I continued, keeping my voice steady and clear. And I'm not responsible for the consequences of choices I didn't make. You chose to prioritize Lila's comfort over my dignity. You chose to believe lies over truth. You chose to enable destructive behavior while punishing healthy boundaries. His eyes dropped to the pavement. Your house troubles, Lila's financial dependency, Owen's needs, those are all results of decisions you made, not me. I understand, he said quietly, but we're still family. That word, family. They'd used it like a weapon for years, a chain to keep me compliant and self-sacrificing. Now it meant nothing except shared DNA. Family means different things to different people, I said. To me, it means mutual respect and support. We've never had that. He looked up, something desperate in his eyes. Can things change? Can we start over? I considered his question honestly. Maybe eventually. But right now, I need distance. I need to keep building my own life. He nodded slowly, then asked the question I'd been waiting for. Can you loan us money? Just until we get back on our feet? I looked at him directly, seeing him clearly for maybe the first time. Not as my father, the authority figure, but as a flawed person who'd made terrible choices and now faced their consequences. No, I said simply. I'm choosing myself now. I'm building my savings, my security, my future. I can't drain that to fix problems I didn't create. He looked stunned, like my refusal violated some natural order where I existed only to fix their messes. But we're desperate, he pressed, and I'm stable because I made good choices. I can't reward your bad ones by sacrificing myself again. No anger heated my words. No vindictiveness sharpened them. Just truth delivered calmly and clearly. He stood up slowly, looking older than I remembered. I hope you can forgive me someday, he said. Maybe, I replied. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'll go back to how things were. That version of me is gone. He left without another word. I watched him walk to his car, shoulders hunched against the winter wind. Then I went back inside to my warm office, my stable job, my earned promotion. That evening in my studio apartment, I lit a candle and made tea. I sat on my second-hand couch, an upgrade from the air mattress, and just breathed. No footsteps overhead demanding attention. No yelling carrying through thin walls. No unspoken expectations pressing down on my shoulders like physical weight. Just my quiet little life taking shape exactly how I wanted it. I'd decorated the walls with framed prints from the bookstore downstairs. I'd adopted a small rescue dog named Pepper, who curled up beside me, warm and trusting. I'd filled my pantry with foods I actually liked instead of whatever was cheapest. My world grew brighter the farther I got from theirs, like walking out of shadow into sunlight. I wasn't rich. I wasn't living some fantasy life. But I was free. And that was worth more than any amount of money or forced family connection. Months later at the hospital, Kelsey asked during lunch, "Do you ever miss them?" I thought about her questions seriously, chewing my sandwich slowly. I thought about the house where I'd grown up, the chaos of family dinners, the constant walking on eggshells. I thought about all the years I'd spent twisting myself into something small enough for them to tolerate, bending and shrinking until I barely recognized myself. Then I looked around my life now, small but peaceful, modest but mine, quiet but full of genuine respect and kindness. I don't miss being unloved, I said finally. I don't miss being the scapegoat, the servant, the one who had to earn basic dignity while others received it automatically. Kelsey nodded, understanding in her eyes. And just like that, the story ended, not with their downfall at my hands, but with my life becoming too full, too peaceful, too self-respecting for their toxicity to fit anymore. They weren't villains I'd defeated in some dramatic confrontation. They were simply weight I'd finally stopped carrying. I walked away from that burning building and built something better from the ashes. And I rose.